VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We're going to have one of the most momentous episodes in our history, probably in this show's lifespan, 2 years, the most momentous episode so far, because I would say out of nowhere, but some of us saw it coming. Boom, we have a massive trade with the Houston Texans, and I'm sure if you're a Vikings fan watching a show like this, you've already seen it. But what it is the Vikings receive a first rounder, which is the 23rd pick, and a 7th. And the Texans get 2 second rounders this year's and next, and an additional 6th rounder. And among behind the scenes, the four of us were scratching our heads trying to figure out why the Texans did this, which really don't care because in our minds it benefits the purple team. But here we are. Now we're going to wait on what I think is another trade, and I think the panel is going to agree to get into the top 10, maybe even the top 3. I'm going to start with our usual Wednesday guest, although this is Friday, Josh Frey, who is the boss at Purple PTSD. We were all smitten with this trade and shocked. You got to tell me what the hell you thought initially, and be honest.
So initially, I have to be honest because I sent you a message about this. I can't make this up. I was kind of confused by it a little bit because when I read it, I thought the Vikings had sent number 11 down too, and I was like, oh, they're going to trade down again and go get a receiver or something. But no, they're keeping number 11. They also have number 23 now. It was just number 42 that they sent. So honestly, we've talked about this all offseason, where this is year 3 of the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah competitive rebuild. And if he was going to make a move to define his career in Minnesota, it had to be this year. And this is the first step of that move, which is ultimately probably going to be trading up and trying to get a QB of the future, which is exactly what the Vikings need. And this is the absolute perfect time to do it. I love this trade. I think it's going to be the defining move of Kwesi's career in Minnesota, and I'm over the moon about it. It's absolutely fantastic.
Most trades, whether they're the Vikings or other teams, you usually end up with an oh shit, like a little bit of that, thinking like, all right, well, it was pretty good, but oh yeah, I don't feel that at all with this. I don't know why the Texans did it. But Josh, I'm going to nail you down. We'll get into this in the next 20 minutes. If it's a precursor to move up the board, who the hell is it for?
So I think the realistic option is probably number 3 with New England. You trade those 2 first rounders and potentially another first rounder in the future to get up to number 3 and go get that, whichever one of the QBs is left on the board behind Chicago and Washington. But man, I look at this and I can't stop thinking about Chicago potentially trading down here, because I mean, regardless of what they think about Justin Fields, they have needs on their roster other than the quarterback position. And if you go into this draft and you have number 9, number 11, number 23, you can fix your entire offensive line problems. You can grab another starting defender at the end of the first round, and then you worry about the quarterback position later, run it back with Justin Fields. Maybe he continues to progress. So that's the trade that I kind of can't get out of the back of my mind. Maybe it's just homerism and it's a Vikings rival, so it's probably not going to end up being that way. But if the Chicago Bears are going to trade number 1 overall, they're not going to get a better deal than the one that the Minnesota Vikings can offer right now.
Yeah, the move boxes out other teams, much to their chagrin, because now the Vikings have more firsts immediately than any other team, I think, can offer. And the other thing to mention about your Bears theory is, like, let's say they decide, you know what, maybe they've thought all along, well, we're going to dink with everybody and we're just going to keep Fields. If they traded with the Vikings, they'd have their 9th pick, the 11th pick, the 23rd pick. And they could still draft J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix and pair that guy with Fields or figure out who's the best coming out of that. And that theory would make sense as to why we haven't seen Fields offloaded yet. We've assumed it's because his trade price was underwhelming after we were told by Bears fans for however long that, oh, it's going to be a sweet deal, baby, and then nothing. But the Fields or the Williams theory can be alive and well because, as you said, nobody else can really offer what the Vikings can as of about 1 hour ago. Brevan, I'm going to ask you now, good sir, your reaction to the trade. I'm sure some of it will be similar to Josh, but let me have it.
Yeah, I told you guys pre-show that I know it looks like I just woke up, and that's because I did. I woke up and I saw the notification on Twitter, and I saw that we got pick 23, and I was like, oh my god, like here we go again, 2022. But no, like the trade is genuinely like a good trade. Like I don't care about the second round pick next year. We're in line for a couple comp third round picks next year anyway. So I guess it kind of sucks to lose the second, but if you're going to be able to turn this into a Drake May, like you make this trade a million times out of a million. And Dustin, we talked Saturday night about nuts dangling. Kwesi's taking them out right now and maybe putting them gently on the table. So the way I look at it, and this might just be, again, using the homerism term, hot take, emotional take an hour after it happened. This is the first part on what could potentially be the best maneuver a Vikings general manager has ever made. And that's including drafting Justin Jefferson, but that's Jefferson falling into your lap. That's including drafting Adrian, trading up for Harrison, whatever. If you turn this into Drake May, drafting your first ever quarterback inside the top 10 in the franchise's history, this could be the best maneuver in franchise history. And again, I say if that's Drake May, because thinking before this, I just didn't know if Drake May was realistic. But now this team that, of course, Thor mentioned it around a month ago, that Jaden Daniels is much more of a Washington quarterback. And now Vegas is starting to reflect that with the odds and reports that New England isn't sold on Drake May. Like, slowly but surely, Drake May is, and it's not just draft fatigue, he's becoming more of a possibility to be a Minnesota Viking. And if that happens, it's the best maneuver a Vikings general manager could ever make. And yeah, I'm just super excited that Kwesi's shown his nuts a little bit.
And the other part is, now that you have this trade with the Texans, which I think trade calculators will show the Vikings got the better value, now it doesn't feel as sinful to trade up the board to get May, because if you've already won the calculator with the Texans, you can flip that capital. Whereas 3 hours ago, I woke up thinking, all right, to get Drake May, you're going to have to give 2 firsts and 2 seconds and maybe more. And now when you get the better part of a trade with a team like the Texans, it feels like you're spending a little bit of the house money. So any of the folks that are still probably like, you can't trade everything for Drake May or whoever it is, you might be able to feel a little reduced anxiety because you've won the trade that set it all off. Janik, all right, you were across the pond, sir. Tell me your reaction to the trade.
So I was literally just writing about Drake May on Vikings territory, and I see a notification on my phone. It says trade, and you always hope it's for your team, but it rarely is. It's like a 3% chance. And you scroll down, Vikings trade, acquire 23rd pick. I was just over the moon. Unlike you, I immediately thought it was trading up and not trading down, but probably would have died if it was trading down. So what a wonderful deal. They now have the draft capital to move up and grab, hopefully, Drake May. He's been my guy for months. So yeah, it's just great for Kwesi to make this deal and not hesitate and grab some second, third round quarterback. At least we hope that's for a quarterback. Yeah, it's just great.
There was some folks on Twitter, or maybe it was just one, that thought this is possibly, well, they can get their edge rusher at 11 and they get Penix at 23. To which I guess that could be the thing, but it's weird that you'd have to do that deal now to get that to happen. Let me ask you with this next question. I'll start with you, Janik. What now will be the price if they trade up to New England, or what do you actually think will be the eventual deal, no matter who it is, whether it's the Chargers? What do you predict as the trade cost to get where they want to get?
So I think the trade calculators show you can just trade up your 2 first-round picks to like 4 or 5. But I think they will add another second. They don't have one, maybe third and the fourth or something, and trade up to 3 to get Drake May. That would be my guess. I also think Jaden Daniels is going to Washington because he's just what offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury wants in a quarterback. So I guess, well, my guess would be Caleb Williams 1 to Chicago, Jaden Daniels at 2, and then Drake May at 3 to Minnesota.
So you think it will cost the 11th pick, the 23rd pick, and
some add-ons, maybe a third. I don't know, maybe second in 2 years.
Yeah, the reason that this is markedly different from my original theory of 2 firsts and 2 seconds is because draft picks in the current year are more valuable than, at least on calculators, than, hey, just throw it into next year. Josh, I'm going to ask you whether it is, so you've outlined the Bears theory. Do you think the trade price for Drake May at number 3, do you think it's more realistic they barter with the Cardinals, or basically the same question that I posed to Janik, what is the eventual price for what they do?
I think, well, first of all, this is just really great because it takes all the risk really out of it, like you laid out. And even if this quarterback that they eventually draft flops, you can just go back and take another shot at him next year. To move up to number 3, I don't think you have to give up your future first round pick. So I do think that is the most realistic option, is trading up to number 3, or maybe it's 4 at Carolina if New England really feels great about a tackle or something, and then you don't have to even risk doing that. But I do think that number 3 is probably where they're going to end up. And if it's Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels 1-2, then Drake May's right there in your lap. And that used to be the ceiling, and it kind of feels like the floor now, which is just awesome.
What if they need both these firsts and next year's first, New England?
I mean, I still do it. I don't think that really, because either way, you're gonna have to do that before this trade regardless, and probably go into 2026 with your draft picks too, to move up that far. So if that's what it takes to get it done, I say just do it. They made the move, and if you're gonna, like Brev said, put your nuts on the table, it's time to do it. It's time to do it, and do it now rather than waiting until 2025 and seeing what happens.
If you could know with certainty, we're 6 weeks away, by the way, 41 days out. If it costs all 3 of the first for Drake May, or there's a McCarthy slides to you at 11, you don't have to trade anything, what are you taking?
I really like JJ McCarthy, but I like Drake May just a little bit better. And I think he's at least a little bit more of a sure thing, especially as an immediate starter in the next year or two, say 2024, he comes in right immediately, or you sit him behind Darnold and play him in 2025. I think there's much more of a realistic chance that May works out in the next 2 years than JJ McCarthy does. And I think if you want to really go for it before the money for Justin Jefferson and Darrisaw really starts to kick in, then Drake May is the guy. You just got to go do it.
Do you think he can win a camp battle in August over Sam Darnold?
I think so. Yeah. I'll be honest. I mean, Sam Darnold, he does a few nice things, but I wasn't especially excited about that signing. I wasn't thinking like, oh, he can be the guy that's going to lead the Vikings to the playoffs this year. So I think he could.
Yeah, I think every single person on this panel felt the same way about Sam Darnold, and we've talked ourselves into it in the last few days about how it can be the Baker Mayfield story. But this trade is markedly more exciting. Brevan, I'm going to ask you about the trade price. We've outlined the Caleb Williams theory. We've talked about 3 firsts to New England for May. The Chargers failsafe is still there because they probably won't want to do business with the Broncos or Raiders. Where are you at for the eventual trade cost if we're all correct that this is a precursor to an additional move?
Yeah, I think everybody else is pretty spot on with it. I can't begin to describe again how smart it is to not be at that point where like you have to send a first next year, have to send a first the year after. Being able to turn your somewhat early second round pick this year, your second round pick that'll probably be early next year, just making that a first round pick this year and making it much more valuable than a first round pick could be this year, the year after that, has put Minnesota in such a way better position to move up for these quarterbacks. And if they're like, or throw the first round next year, whatever, dude, like fine. If it's Drake May, don't care. If it's like, if May is gone and now you're between Daniels and McCarthy, I'm probably hanging up the phone with New England and calling that cornball John Gannon in Arizona and whoever their I think the bald dude. Yeah, I'm calling them up. I'm calling them up and seeing what they want, because if you can either land Daniels or McCarthy, I don't think there's a reason to start to overpay New England that spot if they want too much. So I don't know. I think you guys hit it square on. Honestly, for May at this point, especially, it's kind of whatever it takes. You front loaded the compensation it's going to take for your trade. So instead of eating into your future, which you're going to need those picks pretty badly. But yeah, no. For May, I'm kind of cool. If May ends up going off the board and McCarthy is the guy that you're trading up for, definitely I think you have to look a pick or two deeper, even though I actually just got a report that now the belief around the league is 4 quarterbacks are going in the top 6. So I don't know. Honestly, at this point, it's whatever. These 2 first-round picks don't exist to me since they're going to turn into another one anyway. So do whatever you can, Quasey.
I'm going to make the next segment of the show the devil's advocate part. Let's say that the minority opinion is correct, Janik. What if this move was simply to get the 11th and 23rd overall pick? I want you on the fly to tell me. We already know that they need some kind of quarterback, but let's say that is Penix at 23 or vice versa, Penix at 11. What other asset do they grab with their second first-round pick if there is no trade up?
So first of all, I would hate it. But if they let's say they pick Penix at 23 or some Bonix who I also hate, I think the 11th pick should be a defender, like Terrion Arnold from Alabama, cornerback. I also like all these edge rushers, and Byron Murphy could fill the defensive tackle hole. But man, if they don't grab a quarterback and trade up to grab a quarterback, it will feel like the thing Vikings always do: just draft some random quarterback and hope he pans out, and they never do.
All right, so we're scratching that off Janik's board. But Josh, you had a theory that you talked about offline. That's kind of why I teed up this question. Tell me what that is, or you can extrapolate on more possibilities. If it's 2 first-round picks and not a sexy trade up the board, what would they get? We assume it would probably be Michael Penix. I hope that they would listen to everybody that says don't do Bo Nix. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm like Janik. I would be very disappointed if they don't move up to go get a quarterback here. It would kind of take a lot of the wind out of my sails if that happened. But I do think if they stick at number 11 and 23, you obviously have a need on the defensive line. I think 11, you go get Johnny Newton out of Illinois, fill up that defensive tackle spot, or Byron Murphy, one of those 2 guys. I'd be fine with either one. And then later on, this is kind of where I was initially thinking was, hey, is this a chance to go recreate the 3 deep in Minnesota again? And I was thinking Brian Thomas out of LSU. That's a spot where he's probably going to end up going. And that dude is an absolute burner. I think he ran like a 4.35 or something at the combine, and he's 6'4". That dude, you get him down the field, he's going to take a ton of pressure off of Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in the intermediate space. And he's a home run hitter. He's a touchdown threat. He led the country in touchdowns in college football last year. So there's a reason that he's considered a first-round pick. And if that ends up being the plan, it'll be a nice little consolation prize, I guess. But I would end up being a little bit disappointed if they don't get a quarterback just because of the what if scenario, especially if one of these guys ends up hitting.
I guess sticking at 11 and drafting 23, I think the theory would be there that all of this McCarthy smoke that we've had in the last month turns out to be like Levis or like Malik Willis 2 years ago. And indeed, McCarthy doesn't go in the top 10. Then the Vikings could grab him at 11 and then get who the hell ever they wanted at 23rd. So in either scenario, Brevan, if indeed it's now stick and pick at 11 and 23, tell me your wish list or your prediction, whichever tickles your fancy.
I think Brian Thomas would be really, really fun. So I'm glad Josh mentioned that. But the biggest tease of all time, and ends up being 11-23, then whatever. I would want to go defensively both. Byron Murphy, to have two Byron Murphys would be silly. But I really like Byron Murphy out of Texas. I've been thinking he was going to go a lot earlier than people thought, and I think 11 is definitely a spot that he could go. He's a freak, like capital PH freak. And then 23, I'd probably want to go defensively as well. You got to help out the secondary. I really don't want to watch a Caleb Evans play starting corner every Sunday next year again. If I can help it, at least. I might just have to look away. But if you can get, I don't know if Kenyon Mitchell has kind of raised his draft stock over the offseason, so I don't know if you can get him there. I think Arnold will be gone. Kool-Aid might be gone. So I don't know. There's a corner out of Mizzou. He's got a weird name, so maybe you could land him. But I think you got
straw.
Exactly, yeah. You could probably grab him there, but I don't know. I'd want to go defensive both. I'd actually be really happy. It really, in general, it could be much worse than having 2 first-round picks, even if we're expecting this quarterback of the future. So silver linings, I guess. But if this doesn't turn into a quarterback and this team actually ends up drafting Michael Penix, I'm gonna have some narratives about Kwesi Duff back in his pants.
Yeah, I had to get it out there just in case the excitement has jaded us too much. So that's our theories on 11-23. The final question I have for the panel, I'm going to you, Janik. I'm going to guess that our viewers want to know when. So tell me when you expect the next leg of the trade to fall.
So some comparisons have been made to Philly acquiring Carson Wentz. I think that was a draft day trade, if I'm correct. Josh Allen to Buffalo was a draft day trade, the second part. So I think it's going to be a draft day trade, although I'm not sure you're doing this trade if you don't already have your next move in place and have talked to New England or Arizona, or whoever, and know what you're going to do. So but I think that it's going to be announced during the draft.
Okay, so you don't expect there to be a follow-up move in the next 6 weeks, like with New England or I guess Arizona or something?
I don't, but it would not be surprising at all.
Okay. Josh, do you have a different take, or do you think the second half of this would be splashy quarterback trade into the top 10? Does that happen on draft night?
Yeah, I think unless you're trading up to number 1 with Chicago, I would wait until draft night to do it, just because you won't ultimately know how the board's going to go until you actually get there. And I think doing this move now, it's really smart because it gives them the opportunity over the next 6 weeks to start putting out feelers like, hey, you see this sexy new draft pick we got? We could offer it to you if you're willing to part ways and let us go get a quarterback. So they can start doing that. Yeah, unless they're going to the very top of the mountain, I think that they're waiting until draft night to do it.
Last thing I have for you, Josh, and I'll get to Brevan in a second on this previous question. Josh, if you had the choice for Caleb Williams at number 1 or Drake May at number 3, what are you taking?
I'm taking Caleb Williams.
You are?
I just think that dude's so good, and I really think that he's going to be a star in the NFL, and it would absolutely suck to watch him be the guy that turns around the Chicago Bears as their first true franchise quarterback. So, yeah, if they have an opportunity to go get Caleb Williams and steal him from Chicago, I'm doing it.
Okay. Brevan, what say you on the win of what we think is the next part of this trade?
You guys said around draft day, so I'm going to say this trade will be done by the end of the day today, just because that's really fun and really.
There you go.
Thinking about it, and Janik brought it up. You're not making this move if you don't already know your next move. And maybe that's just me being hopeful that this is actually going to happen and we're not just going to have 11-23. But there's something in the works here. I think Minnesota's on the phones right now because that feels good to believe. And also, I think it would be really nice to look at Sean Payton, give him a middle finger, and just move up now and have him have to think about it for a month, because that's the other team we're competing with in the trade up. They're right behind us. So if you can make Sean Payton suffer for a month, I'm
Well, the last thing that I'll have about the win or the trade in general is, if there's folks that don't think there's a second half coming, why would they do this deal today? Like, there's no good reason whatsoever to be finagling a deal. You could just do this on draft night. And then, let's say the plan was, hey, Kwesi actually wants 11 and 23 because he wants my guy Dallas Turner, and then he wants Bo Nix, God forbid. There's no reason to do that on March 15th. I mean, seriously, let's be honest. Like, you might as well. There's no vested interest to do that right now. And so, in terms of the urgency that Kwesi presumably has, that part needs to get done because you need to know your piggy bank. You can't leave it to chance when Kirk Cousins just walked to the Falcons. And we've said that. I think everybody on this show has said that it's a dangerous game. You're going to feel desperate. It's really dangerous to waltz into the draft when everybody knows that you need a quarterback. So yesterday, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did his best to say, we're going to be flexible. Sam Darnold can be the guy. But he had to say that. If he didn't say that, it's malpractice. If he would have said, bitch, we're taking a quarterback, then all the leverage is gone. So he had to lie yesterday and say, you know what, we really like Sam Darnold, and I don't think he's a bridge quarterback. He had to lie. He was paid handsomely to lie. So for anybody that thinks that this is just an ordinary trade, there's going to be 2 first rounds. The Vikings always mess things up. There was no good reason whatsoever to do this trade in March when it could have waited until draft night. So I think the expediency is there. All right, Brevan, closing arguments. You got anything?
I did want to quickly mention, if this is truly for the quarterback of the future, think about how important this is for JJ. He wants to know the future. Kwesi looked at him and said, here you go, we're doing it. So this is not only huge for, obviously, the quarterback position. This is huge for your future with Justin Jefferson and him signing his football rights away for the next 4 or 5 years.
My closing argument is kind of cynical or sadistic. Now, I don't have to listen to 6 weeks of Sam Darnold being spun as the QB1. That was already getting on my nerves because it's such a casual take to say, hey, they replaced Kirk Cousins with Sam Darnold. Those idiots don't know what they're doing. At least this trade gets the foot in the door for me to say, see, there's more to it. Janik, a closing argument for you. You got anything?
Just adding to what you said a minute ago. You don't trade up in March to 23 because you don't know who's on the board. Maybe you don't like anyone who's on the board there. So why would you do it now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the timing it's just too telling that there's another thing. Josh, my usual staple Wednesday guest, what do you got for a closing argument?
I wanted to bring up Danielle Hunter really quick because I know there were probably some Vikings fans, myself included, that felt a little stung that he left for nothing, kind of. But as of now, not really, because the Vikings, with that trade with the Texans and him signing with the Texans, they've essentially traded Danielle Hunter, number 42, and their 2025 second-round pick for Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman, 2 immediate defensive starters, and another first-round pick. If you were going to trade him at the deadline last year, that trade is never happening. So I think there's some closure there for any Vikings fans that were upset that the Vikings either lost Danielle Hunter or just didn't trade him last year.
Yeah, the weird part of whenever there is an observation or a tweet like yours that says, hey, we essentially traded this for this, usually there's it doesn't really work that way. But that one actually is spot on.
Exactly.
Like it's so lateral, like it's like a highway, like it's going back and forth, that I agree. It's really weird how it worked out. And with Hunter gone, it kind of felt unceremonious because he was such a staple for, my goodness, was it 9 seasons? But now he gets to go to his hometown team. The Vikings got almost 2 for the price of 1 at the edge spot. And the way the chessboard is being played, it seems that the Vikings will get 2 compensatory 3rd-round picks next year, which I'm going to guess that's all we're going to have to look forward to on the draft board, unless they find a way to keep the first that they just got. Let's see. No, the first they didn't have to give up to Houston. All right, gentlemen, this was a fantastic episode. I hope our viewers learned a lot. We'll be back tomorrow night, Brevan and I, talking to OVF, Optimistic Vikings fan. I invited him on the show last week, or planned it, And now he's just over the moon because it's one of the coolest weeks in Vikings history in general, and especially in the last decade. All right, guys, we'll talk to you next time. You take it easy.
See ya.
Later.